Generative AI is forcing CIOs to face a new dawn, whilst legacy tech holds them back like superglue. It is breathing life into legacy tech and shaping new business models. Legacy tech itself is a business disease that weighs down businesses and people inside of them like nothing else, but it doesn't have to be that way. Francis Carden is a thought leader across all intelligent automation technologies. He's been in the IT industry 30 plus years and now provides leadership to large enterprises, accelerating their digital excellence programs. And he supports CIOs move their legacy systems into the 21st century. Today, we'll pick his brains and talk about how CIOs should be reacting to the relentless march of tech as illustrated by advances made possible by generative AI. Francis, good to see you, sir.
Hi, Kieran. Good to see you as well.
Right, let's jump in, Francis. Francis, you've implemented a huge number of global scale automation programs, but what do you see as the biggest challenges facing CIOs today?
I think it's there's an acceleration of these challenges, but they're the challenges that have been going on for quite some time. Organizations spend vast sums of money paying for the systems that have been built over the last 20, 30, or even 40 years, so effectively keeping the lights on. So that's the IT's main problem. And of course, business is seeing all of their competitors, picking up on all these new technologies and accelerating some really innovative and creative, go-to-market strategies. And so I think the biggest challenge is making sure the CIO keeps the lights on, security, governance, and everything goes around it, whilst actually being able to accelerate and utilize some of these newer technologies.
So how is technology changing the way businesses operate today then? What are the CIOs doing with this tech?
Well, so there's two aspects. One is that, as I said, you've got all your old stuff. You've got to keep it running. So you can just keep band-aiding it, if you like. We've been doing that for quite many years, just making it more efficient and adding in, automation across, the top of it all. But what to bring in this new stuff, the generative AI, the main topic of conversation, let's be honest here today, who isn't talking about that? You can do that. You can add that on and see it as a band-aid, and very successfully. But underneath all of that, to really benefit from these technologies, you've got to start looking at the older stuff and applying these technologies to give you a way out, right? That rather than continue to pile onto this legacy debt, take a step back and start using something. I mean, we're seeing generative AI now build applications for you. Sometimes people are saying that should be in code. I think it should be in no code. You don't need code at all anymore. And so what you're seeing is, the envied enterprise. And for our listeners, if you've got there, I'm sure you've got other competitors from you that you envy of what they're doing, digital native maybe. You can take this technology and have that in spades really, really fast these days. You don't have to wait the 2 to 5 years to build an application that's going to make you the envied rather than the one that's envying.
Oh. But it's interesting, you can put a lid on old legacy tech with new tech as well. So I've seen, like, for example, conversation business applications sit on top of all the legacy you're talking about. Is that what you mean by extending the life of that tech? Or is that a solution to an age-old problem?
No, it is exactly that. So there's almost, you could take all your old stuff and keep applying this new tech, and to get the benefit today, that's actually advisable to some degree, but not far behind anymore. Closing that gap, you can actually accelerate the reimagining of these applications, if you like, and have the conversation. So you can get on the bandwagon today. That's nothing holding you back. But I almost feel like as you build this stuff, you need the end of life plan to accelerate for the stuff underneath. It's a parallel, but those that are doing, the band-aid with the new generative AI, and if that's all they're planning, good luck a year or 2 or 3 from now, right? As these other organizations are actually using generative AI against the core applications themselves to reimagine them. That's going to accelerate you coming out the other side really at a competitive advantage. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It does. It's interesting. I just wonder if people will actually address their legacy tech, or will they kick it down the road Because at the moment, I suppose one thing I see, Francis, is that generative AI is an amazing, what do we call it, application platform or something else. And it's turned around or turned about, as I semi-predicted years ago. So everybody was quite content, not worrying that their secretaries and their taxi drivers would suddenly be automated and digitized. And now they're faced with the prospect of the rise of artificial intelligence and generative AI. And we're seeing that potentially impacting folks' jobs. So now everyone, I think, is going to get impacted in different ways. But I still see folks retaining their old habits and jumping after new shiny things and maybe not fixing the past. And that will lead lots of orgs where they are. What are your thoughts, Francis, on AI and generative AI and its impact on roles and businesses ahead?
Well, in the intro, you mentioned my 30 years of doing intelligent automation through all of its different names and guises, and at times it actually worked out, Kieran. It was 40 years. It's 43 now. So
oh, wow. I was taking a couple off to make you seem younger.
Well, thank you. You're very kind. So I've spoken a little bit about this. This is not one of those technologies you hope may be a fad and goes away. It's like, I think that for those of our listeners that think that that might be the case, you need to unthink that really quickly. We have continued to paint over, gloss over, band-aid those legacy systems, and we have been successful, things like robotics and just sort of like just patching things on and connecting new technologies. But the scale in which this is moving, I mean, seriously, we got examples of where you can build an application by chatting right to an engine, and it says, oh, well, what fields would you like? You could imagine if you were creating a pizza app, and it's a good to give that example simply because it's one we can all understand. You can say, well, what fields would you need in an application to take a pizza order? And it gives it to you. And you can feed that into a no-code engine. And then you're like, well, okay, well, what data fields would we need to store? What credit cards would we need to interact with? What would the UI like? Well, actually, this generative AI is coming back, and we're seeing applications being built in that, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not enough, in that 5 to 10 minute range, where you can start playing with that application. You can then get it to generate you 1 million records of test data. And it is mind-blowing what is happening. But if all you're imagining is to use this technology to keep putting on top of your existing systems, then you're going to come out the other side with some glory. And then it's like 95% of your budget's still going to be going towards keeping the lights on, not applying a lot of that budget. And this is what CIOs are having to balance with business, is that as we get more and more efficient in IT, we can use some of those resources to become acceleratedly more efficient in business.
And I do hope they take that route. Otherwise, you say it is like an anchor weighing them down. So do you think CIOs then, Francis, need intelligent automation or RPA, the band-aids you potentially were alluding to earlier on, now in an era where generative AI allows you to prompt and to click to get all of the answers that you actually want?
So I have to answer yes, you need RPA, but the need is de-accelerating faster than the acceleration of why you need it, right? Because if you can look at a process and you can start, with IT and business alignment, all the security and governance you'll ever need goes within the platforms that are using generative AI to make sure you come out with what you build really securely. And you can reimagine that process, which is amazing, and just say, oh, we don't need that old stuff anymore. Because that old stuff was built in a different era for a different way we interacted with customers. We used to walk into the bank to pay money in with a piece of paper that would end up with a nightly run to do a batch and a balance, right? Now we're like, well, that just happens. It's done in the back end. But I'm not, we know those legacy systems are doing a lot of work. We have to keep them. So you can plug little elements in as you need it. But as I say, the plan should always be to end of life these band-aids, these robots. And so you're seeing a de-acceleration in the use of them because they're being replaced, but they're still being used to plug gaps to accelerate you using some of the technologies like conversational AI, like low code, or like integration. It's very, very important to have those band-aids at your fingertips in your toolkit, but it's also important to have a plan to go, eventually that wound is going to be like I say, cured, and you can look forward to greater things, because your competition is, right. They're not standing still. Large organizations are doing this, and if you don't, then you're going to be in the laggard territory.
Yeah, although I do wonder, though, if you have all those things at your fingertips, the temptation is to keep touching your fingertips and keep progressing and making things last, particularly at a time, Francis, when, let's be honest, IT budgets aren't exactly bursting at the seams. Nobody's throwing cash at things. And therefore, sometimes you just have to make things last that little bit longer.
But we've been saying that for 40 years, right? And I think that, we've squeezed almost the last pieces of lemon out of some of the lemon juice out of some of these lemons. And so let's paint it another way. Imagine, I've got some examples. We've got a customer who had 53 versions of that application spread all over the world. That's a cost to IT all over the world to manage 53. They're very similar apps, but they're so different. You have to manage 53 of them in the infrastructure. They shifted in less than 2 years to one version of the app, and using a centralized rules system, they could manage the different variations of the way that app should behave. And another example is where an organization had 300 controls that needed to put inside every app they ever built from day one, right? Because they needed that security, risk, the governance all built into everything. They put all those into a centralized rules engine. So now they never have to write them again. They just make sure that gets consumed, centrally from a central point. So you're seeing this cost of IT as we move to cloud, as we move to these other technologies, really coming down so fast if it's done properly. And you're seeing operational efficiency with conversational AI, with generative AI, with low code and no code, accelerating innovation like never before. And I'm telling you, if that IT budget stays the same, you're not going to be able to accelerate unless you go raise money, or of course, this is a tough time to do any of that. But the enterprises that are doing this right are seeing they're knocking it out of the park, and they can consume this generative AI 10 times faster than the legacy laggards.
So what is your vision then for the future of IT? And in addition to that vision, Francis, how will you measure the success of it?
So it's one of my favorite questions, but it's also I guess one of the toughest questions, right? Because people going up, is this the end of IT? Is this the end of people to write code? Not at all. What we want is for more creativity, right, coming in. So the IT, they need to manage the risk, the security, the governance, and the controls. But they're not even able to do that because they're just fixing bugs and making sure the hardware works and the backups are done. But as you move to these new technologies like cloud, where a lot of that stuff is done for you, they can need to focus on is the risk and the governance. Now you can see that they have more time with the CIO's help and the CTO's help, bringing them an alignment to business to actually tackle business problems. The very reason we as customers complain when we deal with our insurance company or our mobile phone provider or whatever it might be, we complain because the systems are poor, right? And they're poor even if you put other technologies on top of them only. So I think you're going to see a new generation, quote unquote, of IT where they can actually be more innovative if they want to be, because the cost reductions and the I guess the simplification and the modernization of the way applications are managed provides them with more capability to provide business with more insights in how to consume what's going to be an accelerating movement around generative AI, things we don't even know today that might be big tomorrow in that short a time frame. And that's what IT need to help business with. So business and IT alignment may be that final dream that will happen. And these technologies are just delivering such wonderful things now and scaring people, right?
I wonder which will be easier to do, remove legacy debt or get business and IT to actually talk to each other, because that in itself is a form of legacy where both in many companies, or probably if I use the word too many companies, Francis, are still divided functions. The business doesn't understand technology and the technology team doesn't understand the business, which is something that's been around for quite some time, for as long ago as I started.
Well, some of them survived the digital native, these companies that started with nothing, that came out of nowhere to start providing mobile phones or insurance or banking. They didn't build on 3,000 legacy applications, i.e. that legacy debt. They started from scratch, and they had, whether that was in low code or no code. With generative AI, it's creating that next gap. And you cannot keep, if you cannot keep up with these technologies because you're strangled by the legacy systems, then it's a race to whether you survive or not. And I think that we've never seen, and I think that's what might finally bring IT and business together. We're seeing it ourselves. We're witnessing it within the no-code technology space now, adding generative AI, where you can build things in moments as opposed to years, right? And you can experiment faster to live and production like you've never been able to before. I think people should be worried, but that worry should quickly turn to reimagining the way software is going to be built from this day forward. It's not being built the same way. It's not being deployed the same way. And it is just bringing ideas and innovation from IT and business like never before. And it's an exciting time.
Isn't it? That's why I enjoy being in IT. So how do you see the role of the CIO changing in the next few years then?
Yeah, I think we touched on a little bit of that with what we've been talking about, but it is almost like it is now your role to make sure you are embracing these technologies, keeping the lights on where it's necessary for some of the legacy stuff that's just going to take a lot longer, right, to deprecate, but you've got to be planning for that deprecation, and working then with the other leaders around the organization in business and at the board level, and to talk about what competitors are doing, to talk about what you could do to be leading edge, right? You don't have to be bleeding edge unless you want to be. I mean, but you can start to look at these technologies and imagine where you can take your organization and become the superstar. If all you're doing is spending your time just making sure all that stuff is just ticking along, it's not necessarily the greatest experience for a CIO. And also it's not what the board wants. And it's certainly not what the customers of that enterprise want, because they'll be able to switch faster than ever in the future. Generative AI is going to tell the customer how to switch from one mobile provider to another, from one insurance company to another. So if our customers are using ChatGPT and conversational AI, then we better be in the enterprise. So that's really the role of the CIO, is to get closer and closer to business and deliver on that promise.
I was kind of hoping that COVID had taught them to do that, though. It was, for me, businesses had to pivot. They had to move really quickly. CIOs had to jump in and become business people. They had to launch things in an agile way. Everybody communicated really effectively. Have you seen a bit of a demise in that then pre-COVID? Has everybody gone back to the way they were operating? Because what you're describing there is the CIO who understands the business, who's a business partner, who introduces new technology, who deals with the legacy tech in the background, who has to cope with digital native competitors. Is that one individual, or is that a whole team of individuals that need to make all that happen? Is that a superstar CIO or something that you expect everyone to be able to deal with? Just put it in priority order and spend time at each.
I think, it's an interesting way of looking at it, Kieran. So that makes a really good question, right? Because I like the idea that we're going to have far more collaboration with more people. But look, the CIOs and other people in the organizations are going to have to step up. They're going to have to step up and not just take the status quo answers from their other leaders, right? Now, COVID did actually make a dent in a lot of the legacy stuff. It wasn't possible to, if you were a bank, for example, every bank where you could only get a mortgage if you walked into the bank. You could only get a loan if you walked into the bank. Well, in less than 3 months, they not only reimagined those applications in this new era, they actually went to live, and they allowed all of their customers, many, many hundreds of thousands of customers, to start actually interacting with them to get loans and mortgages by never leaving their homes. So it can be done when forced. Some, of course, have got away with it, and they've just managed to sort of wrap that around a bit more. But generative AI, I think, is going to be the it's going to give the visibility to everybody that's interested in seeing, well, we could do that as well. And that's what it's doing, is it's putting the CIOs on notice that they're being watched even more closely, because I'm seeing them doing it. So why can't we do it? You've been giving me the excuses. One excuse is we spend 95% of our budget to keep the lights on in IT. There's no room left, right, to be innovative. Well, you have to be. You got to figure that out. And as you move some of these legacy systems away from that expensive baggage into these new systems, into this new era, and you realize it's a fraction of the cost and time to manage them, then you can accelerate the use of these new technologies, as your competitors will be doing.
Interesting thought, and we'll end on that. But it just reminds me of something that another IT expert mentioned the other day. Their IT budget hasn't changed in decades. And they gave me the comparison that says, nor has my household budget, but I have to be innovative with what I've got. And as you mentioned a moment ago, Francis, some of this is excuses, or it sounds like excuses at times. I just need the drug of more money. And if only you give me more money, I'd be able to do more and better things. Whereas you're quite rightly describing something like generative AI is going to be game changing. And if organizations do not approach it as a game changing moment and alter how they do business, and COVID demonstrated that they could if they had to, then now maybe COVID is a second coming where they now need to, because they won't be around if they don't. And they have CEOs who have seen what's possible and are demanding more for the money that they've got. Francis, thank you so much for today, sir. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Kieran. Thanks for listening.